What an interesting week. We have Democrats Rashida Tlaib and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez both accusing Republicans and Donald Trump of being racist. Yet, who actually got censured this week for real racist comments? Maybe perhaps a Democrat? We'll look at that. Plus, NCAA Division II women's track records are going down by a man. We'll get into those details plus a whole lot more. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour.
And God bless the United States of America.
All right, so another Democrat is in trouble for racist actions, and we're going to get to that. We're going to get to Maryland House Delegate Marianne Lacinti. But I want to set the stage by telling you what's gone on this week. And as you know, Trump's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, was paraded out by the Democrats to testify on what a bad guy Trump is. And in particular, he testified in front of the House Oversight Committee, and there was just a very interesting exchange, which really shows the true nature of Democrats and how, especially some of them, never hesitate to play the race card. So what happened is Trump's getting hammered by Michael Cohen, saying he's all sorts of bad things. And one of the ongoing themes is that Trump is a racist. So as a guest of Republican Representative Mark Meadows, Lynn Patton showed up. She works at HUD. She's a family friend of the Trump, known him for years. And she was there, and Meadows mentioned her and talked about how she supports Trump, and she wouldn't support Trump if he were a racist based on her background. And that was just too much for the Democrats, and especially Democrat Rashida Tlaib. And here is what she had to say.
Just because someone has a person of color, a black person working for them, does not mean they aren't racist. And it is insensitive that some would even say it's the fact that someone would actually use a prop, a black woman, in this chamber, in this committee, is alone racist in itself.
So obviously, Mark Meadows was incensed. He asked the chairman of the committee, Elijah Cummings, Democrat, to strike that from the record. And this exchange, I'm no fan of Elijah Cummings, but I actually felt sorry for him for a split second because he made the attempt, the effort to ask Tlaib if she would take back her comments or phrase them in a different way. And here is just watch his reaction when she didn't take it back, but she offered to read it again.
Would you like to rephrase that statement, Ms. Tlaib?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can actually read it from here.
So after that, Tlaib went on, explained a little bit more, and gave a classic non-apology apology.
I am not calling the gentleman, Mr. Meadows, a racist for doing so. I'm saying that in itself, it is a racist act.
So yeah, according to her, it's like I'm not saying you're a liar. You just committed a lying act. You're not a jerk. You just committed a jerkish act. So you're not a racist. It's a racist act. I mean, give me a break. She's calling him a racist. She's calling Donald Trump a racist, and this whole thing just some kind of parade, as if a black woman, Lynn Patton, can't have an opinion about Donald Trump that's counter to what the left has said. And of course, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, being one of those freshman, wackos along with Tlaib, came out, and here's what she tweeted. She said, "Total bravery by Rashida Tlaib as she reminds the nation that tokenism is racism." Okay, so she jumps in, of course, and has ridiculous stuff to say because that's not what this is about. This was showing that Donald Trump is not a racist. And actually, Patton went on TV and showed all the things that Donald Trump has done for the black community. It's not enough that black, unemployment is historically low, but just effort after effort, prison reform, and on to help the black community, of course, which gets ignored by the left. But look at what else has happened this week. There was an actual action in Maryland to censure a Maryland delegate, a Democrat, for comments that she made earlier this month. And it really just shows that, behind closed doors, who the real racists are. So let's take a look at this report. Here's a report from the Washington Post. A white lawmaker from Hartford County apologized to the leaders of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland for using a racial slur to describe a legislative district in Prince George's County, but also told her black colleagues that she did not recall saying it, according to 2 law members who attended the meeting. All right, the Post went on to report, caucus members confronted Delegate Marianne Lacente on Monday night over allegations that she told a white colleague during an after-hours gathering at an Annapolis cigar bar that when he campaigned in Prince George's County on behalf of a candidate last fall, he was door-knocking in an N-word district. So that's what she said. And so that's erupted, and people just went ballistic. And so just yesterday, on Thursday, the Maryland House voted, and the vote was 137-0 to censure Lacente. So in a follow-up report, here are some of her comments, as far as, whether she should resign or things like that are always thrown at the Republicans if anything like this ever comes up. So here's her comments from the Washington Post. Lacente, who in a statement Tuesday apologized for my word choice several weeks ago, said Thursday that some of her critics rushed to judgment and jumped on the bandwagon of condemnation for political expediency. Quitting is easy, but not the road to redemption, she said. Staying here, accepting responsibility is hard work, but I am up for the challenge, and that is why I am staying. Healing begins tomorrow. Give me a break. It's like Democrats can get away with anything. They accuse Republicans and conservatives of being racist and bigots, on and on and on, but when it happens to them, they never step down. Remember Ralph Northam? I mean, classic blackface. Then the number 3, the Attorney General in Virginia, same thing. And now in Maryland, we have this, and not one of them are resigning. Not one of them are doing anything other than saying, I'm going to heal, I'm going to redeem myself. And it's a process. And guess what? The Democrats just let it slide. And it's just so typical of the double standard that exists from the left in general, not just Democrats, but the media and anybody that pushes this agenda that Republicans, or this angle that Republicans and conservatives are racist, yet more is done to support minorities by the conservative side because we don't look at people any different. It's like whether you're black, white, brown, it doesn't matter. Our policies are going to lift everybody up. Tax cuts are tax cuts. If it helps the poor, it doesn't matter if that poor person is black, white, or whatever, the policy is going to work. Yet Democrats can only succeed by dividing the country, dividing along race or gender, ethnicity, or whatever. And you see it happening over and over again that they really do not live by what they say. They preach it, but they don't practice it. And it just comes to bite them every single time. So, all right, let's move on. On Monday, we talked about Connecticut high school, where 2 boys just dominated in the girls' track divisions that they entered. They were allowed to compete, which, hurt other girls that wanted to advance to regionals to showcase their talents in front of coaches and scouts and things like that. Their places were taken by boys in the girls' track meet, and that's perfectly allowed. Well, now we have a follow-up story. This is at the college level, NCAA Division II, Franklin Pierce University. We have Cece Telfer. Okay, so up until last year, Cece went by Craig Telfer. Is a guy, he's run track for Franklin Pierce before, even last year, but then this year decided that he's going to run as a girl, as a woman. And guess what? He's dominating, he's breaking records, and he's winning. So this past month, they had a major track championship for their conference. And here's a report from the Blaze on kind of some of the stuff that's going on. The Franklin Pierce women's track program is enjoying some unprecedented success. In December, it broke into the national top 25 rankings for the first time, and Telfer is among those leading the way. The senior is the top women's competitor in the 55-meter dash and the 55-meter hurdle events, and was named the most outstanding track athlete at the Northeast 10 Conference Championship event. So this guy is named the outstanding women's athlete. And it just shows what's happening. It shows what's going to happen for all the feminists out there and those that want advances in women's rights and women's sports. Welcome to the destruction of women's sports, because it's just going to continue happening. This guy was competing in men's divisions last year, and was so. Now he's dominating in the women's events. And here's just some actual data to compare how he did versus how he would do against his male competitors. All right, so in the 55-meter dash, 60-meter dash, okay, Telfer won with a time of 7.63 seconds, all right? So in the men's division, that would have put him a full half second slower than 8th place. Now, it's only 60 meters, so the time disparity is not going to be a lot, but he's a full half second off of 8th place, and yet he won the women's division. In the 200-meter dash, he dominated there, winning with a time of 24.45 seconds, and this time was nearly 2 seconds slower than the men's 8th place finisher. So there's your direct comparison for all of those on the left that say there's no difference between men and women as far as speed and endurance and strength. This guy competed as a man last year, competed as a woman this year, is allowed to do it by the NCAA, who say there's no appreciable difference. He's dominating, and he wouldn't have even placed in the top 8 in the men at that exact same meet. So that just shows you what's happening, what's just around the corner, what's happening now as far as women's athletics. Welcome to the future, and welcome to women never winning again if this is allowed to continue. And finally, just a little brief story. It wouldn't be a complete show if I mentioned Rashida Tlaib and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but I didn't mention Ilhan Omar. I mean, those three are like the three stooges of Congress. And, whether it's terrorism, stupidity, or racism, they play all the cards. And so Omar was on a podcast this week, and they were talking about Venezuela. And even though numerous countries, of course, including the United States, recognizes the Guaido regime in Venezuela as the interim president, as the rightful regime, and kind of turning our backs on Nicolas Maduro, who took over for Hugo Chavez and has run that country into the ground. Venezuela was once the most prosperous South American country, and now people are eating dogs. There's poverty in the streets. There's no food, and yet Omar refuses to acknowledge this regime, this new administration. And here is and even the Democrats have come on board in Washington to recognize the new administration. And her response on a podcast is, do you agree with your fellow Democrats? She said, absolutely not on this issue. And earlier this year, here's what she tweeted. She said, a U.S.-backed coup in Venezuela is not a solution to the dire issues that face Trump's efforts to install a far-right opposition will only incite violence and further destabilize the region. We must support Mexico, Uruguay, and Vatican's efforts to facilitate peaceful dialogue. All right, well, you know what incites violence and further destabilizes regions? Terrorism. And the number one recruiting area for terrorists in the United States is Omar's district. So just think about that as you're going into the weekend, and she talks about not inciting violence or destabilizing areas. So anyway, folks, that's our show. I hope you have a great week. Please sign up. Please tell your friends. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour.